Hey guys, I'm here today to show you guys how I clean the fluke that I catch, and I use a pretty specific method. I know there's a lot of cleaning videos out there, but this is the way I do it. So I have 4 fish in this cooler that I'm going to be cleaning for you today, and I'll show you how I do it. I'm not a commercial cleaner or anything, I'm just a recreational fisherman, so this is the way that I've developed my method over time to keep things nice and clean. All these fish have been sitting in this cooler in an ice bath slurry overnight, and that helps keep the fish nice and firm, and that's an important part to cleaning your fish too. Keeps the flesh nice and firm. Taking a paper towel and wiping the slime off of this fish just to make it a little bit easier, and just take a look in the environment in my setup and you can see how I have things kind of laid out. Alright, this first diagonal cut that I make is intentionally to avoid the belly. And you don't want to cut into the belly of your fluke or any fish because it contains a lot of liquids and goo from the intestines that you don't really want to get into your fish. So after that diagonal cut, you make a slice right down the center of the fish, and then you just start to kind of peel or fillet the fish off of the bone. And I'm going to do this with 4 fish, so there's a few things that I want you to try to notice as I'm doing my fillets. I am left-handed, so if you're right-handed, you may want to flip this video and watch it in the other direction. But what I'm doing with the top and bottom fillets is I'm laying them on top of each other, flesh to flesh, without the skin touching it. I call the skin the dirty side and the flesh the clean side. So it's important to keep the fish flesh against each other so that you reduce any contaminants that are on the slime that were on the skin to get into your meat. Alright, so once we do the dark side, I flip it over and do the same thing on the light side. You just saw me clean my knife, and you'll see that frequently, that I'm just wiping the scales or slime off of my knife as I am doing each cut. It's important to have a very clean knife, and you don't want to have it getting caked with dried on fish parts and things like that. That will prevent it from doing its job properly. Alright, so same thing on the white side. You take off both fillets, lay them flesh to flesh, and then we're done with that piece. I take my sheet of newspaper, do a little cleanup, and you can see that I still have a majority of my cutting board that's been uncontaminated with fish. So now we're going to the skinning process of each of these 4 pieces. So to skin the fillets, you just put your knife on a diagonal cut and kind of do what I just showed you there. You just push the knife into the cutting board, and it will glide along that skin, hopefully not taking too much, not leaving too much meat on the skin. Okay, so here's another point that I want to make. You notice that when I'm skinning the fillets, I will put them at the very bottom, or actually in this video it's at the top of the cutting board, but right against where I'm sitting, so that I can use the knife and flex it and not have that handle pushing into the cutting board at all. So watch this, as the handle of the knife as I'm skinning right here is off the cutting board, so that I can run my knife parallel as possible to the cutting board itself. Okay, so each time I take a piece of meat off the skin, I flip it over and put it in the center part of the cutting board. The center part is the clean part of the cutting board, and that's where all the clean pieces will end up and then go into the bin that you see on the right side. So again, I'm left-handed, so I start always at the tail side as I fillet and take my skin off, and I work from, well, on this video from left to right, but it's really, well, it is left to right. Alright, so after each piece is taken off the skin, I'll just trim off any little bits that may be still attached to that fillet. And you see I'm throwing them on the ground to the left side of the screen there. That is what I'm going to use, little scraps of fish to feed the killies that I have in a killie pen. So I'm going to be making use of a lot of these scraps. Alright, so you can see the cutting board is clean again. We're going to take out the next fish and start all over again. And I'll try to explain a couple more details of what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So being left-handed, I always start with the head side of the fish to my right. And again, you're going to have to flip this in your brain if you want to adjust this the right way, but I am making that diagonal cut, trying to be really careful not to get into that gut section. And you'll see, I think on the next fish, or yep, that fish, I actually punctured a little bit of the fluid of the gut section, so I threw a paper towel on there right away to absorb that so it didn't get into my flesh of my fish. Okay, so again, same process. We're taking 2 fillets off of each side of the fluke, and this video I would say is intended for the somewhat beginner fluke filleter, because there's a lot of videos out there that show people zipping fluke out in 30 seconds, but this one I'm taking my time and taking care to get as much of the meat off as possible, but also not rushing things. I'm trying to be very careful. I'm just, again, a recreational fisherman and doing this for my own food source. Alright, flip it over and make that diagonal cut, starting from the top of the head and then rounding it around the belly section. Stay away from the belly. I'm going to say that several times. On the white side, there's actually a vertical line that goes, or a horizontal line that goes across that fish that you can follow to make that almost like a letter T, and you can follow that all the way to the tail. This just takes a little bit of practice to get the knife running underneath the flesh and trying to leave just bones when you're done. Okay, show me flip that fillet. So again, that top part of the cutting board, or top to me but bottom on the video, is where I am putting, it's another what I call a dirty side of the fillets, because the skin side is down on the cutting board. So on my cutting board, I keep it dirty on top, dirty on bottom, and in the middle is where I put everything that's still staying clean and then getting ready to put in that bin. And one thing you'll notice that I don't have any water here. I'm not washing anything. I'm not washing the cutting board. I don't have my hose or sink nearby, and these pieces are staying as clean and, you know, basically ready to go right into whatever cooking method you want to make them after I take this off. You don't want to wash down your fillets or your fish with fresh water, because it will deteriorate some of the meat. It'll add chlorine particles to it, and I just try to keep my fish as clean as possible. You saw me right there throw a paper towel into that bin. Paper towel just absorbs a little extra moisture, so all of my cleaned pieces I will just put on a bit of paper towel, and it'll keep everything nice and dry. Alright, so again, filleting, taking the pieces off, flipping it over, taking off some of that thin meat. Some people actually really like that, but I'm not a big fan, so I tend to give it to the killies for them to eat. Discard, I have a nice discard bucket, and then I have my pieces that go onto another separate area that I'm going to be feeding the killies. Alright, so when you're skinning, you see me wiping my knife onto the newspaper quite a bit just to get any debris off, but it's important that you're using this knife properly. This is a Dexter 8-inch fillet knife, and it's, in my opinion, the best knife for fluke ever made. They do make another skinnier version of this knife, but I prefer this type. Watch carefully as I do this last piece. You really want to use the flex of that knife when you start at the tail right there and then turn it, and now I'm pushing and I'm flexing that knife. It's hard to describe, but this just takes a little bit of time and experience to get it off of that skin so that there's no more flesh on the skin, and you're left with just beautiful pieces of fish. One more thing that I'll note when I do the next fish skinning is how I put a little notch near the tail. Alright, so third fish coming. I just have a little stack of newspaper by my feet. Lay a sheet down, leave a section on the bottom of that cutting board so that I can put my fillets once I peel them off of the fish, and start the process again. These fish have a lot of slime on them coming right out of the pail, so you'll see that's why I'm using this newspaper or paper towel, just to give it a little wipe off, get some of that slime off of there. It just helps to prevent any of that getting into my meat. You saw me rotate the cutting board, and I do that in the beginning of all of my pieces here, and that's kind of a good way that I've developed to not have to move around and shift the fish too much. I just kind of rotate the cutting board to get it in the position where I can then peel these fillets off of the fish. I'll kind of be silent a little bit here now and just let you watch, and if I see any of those little tips, I'll add them in for you. Skin side down on the cutting board. Cleaning the knife. Flesh to flesh. Any little scraps you leave on the fish, I will take off and we'll use that for killie food. Keep that knife as clean as possible. Diagonal cut. Go around the belly. Stay away from that belly. Horizontal slice following that line down the middle. If you have a really sharp knife, you can get through this all in one long cut there. Clean those scales off the knife and then start doing your filleting. Just let the knife find the backbone of that fish and run the knife along the backbone. Flip it over, a nice clean fillet. Dirty skin side down on the cutting board. Don't puncture into that belly again. Flesh to flesh. Clean the knife. Discard the carcass. Get your cutting board ready to do the skinning. Alright, so pay attention. When I do the skinning, you watch on the tail side of the fish, I'm going to put I'm just removing a little bit of bones right there. But right about here, I put a little notch there, and that's just enough for me to get my fingers of my hand just to hold and keep that tight pressure on the skin. I'm pulling it to the left on the video. I'm pulling that skin as I'm pushing the knife in the direction running under the flesh and over the skin. Clean the knife. Get my fish right up against the edge of the cutting board, make my little notch. You lose just a tiny little bit of fish right at the base where the tail is, but it gives you something to hang on to when you're doing that skinning process. Strip off that little fin flesh, and look at that. Beautiful fillet right there. And everything I'm doing is pretty intentional. You may notice that my right hand is basically what I call my dirty hand, and my left hand, which is my knife hand, is my clean hand. And even though I have gloves on both hands, I will usually pick up the final piece of flesh with my clean hand. In the middle of the fluke fillets are sometimes little bones, and then you put the finished fillet into the final bin, and just repeating, just using the top and bottom of the cutting board, taking off a couple little bones. I'm going to make that little notch at the tail end and glide my knife, pushing it down into the skin as I work it along the edge, and I'm pulling with my right hand to the left there. And that strip of flesh just peels right off with little killie eggs, little fluke eggs on there, and there you go. Okay, hopefully I've explained all this as well as I can. I know this is sort of a long video, but I have friends that have just started to learn how to fillet fish, and I wanted to give this demonstration to them and thought it might help others who are basically new fishermen wanting to learn how to fillet a fish. Again, I'm left-handed, which is pretty much a minority in the world, so if you're right-handed, just kind of flip this video in your mind and do things in a mirror image. Stay away from that gut section. There's really not much meat in that gut section that I'm missing out on, so I don't mind cutting that section and keeping it away. There's ribs there, and the meat there has some little bones in it, so it's basically not too much of a waste when I cut that little bit away. And Some people do like that fin section of the meat, but I'm not a big fan, like I said earlier, so I'm happy to just cut that away after I do my skinning. Flesh to flesh, rotate the board, try to keep your, all your cuts so that you're not having to twist your arms too much. And you see I'm not even standing up at all or moving or rotating. I'm rotating the cutting board as I need it. Anytime my knife gets a little bit too much scales or anything slime on it, I'll just use the newspaper, wipe it off. Using the tip of that blade to really get through. And the white side is sort of thin, so you want to be really careful on not losing too much meat there. All this is a real-time video and not sped up at all, so I just wanted to show you how long it takes a typical person to clean a fluke and clean 4 fluke. Sure, most people will never get to the end of this video, but I'm just putting it out there for repetition, just so you can see over and over that I'm doing the same exact thing. Using the newspaper, using the clean and dirty side of my cutting board. One thing that I can impress upon you is that I don't have to clean my cutting board at all in between fish. I don't have to hose anything down. I don't have to wash any of the pieces. Everything stays very clean. Doesn't have any guts on it, doesn't have any slime or debris once I put it into that fish bin right there to the right. And I keep all my carcasses and skin pieces in that bucket, which I'm just going to use for crab bait. So trying to make use of as much of this as possible. I'm going to feed the killies that I use to catch the fluke with that, and going to use the skin and the carcasses to catch crabs. So a lot of this is going to be useful. Almost done with this video. If you've made it this far, I appreciate your watching my instructional tutorial video on how I clean fluke, and hopefully this will help you to do a little bit better job with your fish in the future. If you've liked this video and learned something from it, please subscribe to my channel. It always helps, and I hope that this is something that you can pass on and share to some other people as well. My friends have been taking a lot of time to clean all of their fillets recently. It's fluke season, and I just wanted to help anybody out that might need it. Alright, have a good day, everybody. Just going to do a little finishing cleanup. Oh, that's one more thing, that these gloves kind of come in handy. I just take all my slimy, yucky newspaper and paper towels and take one of my gloves and just wrap it all up, so I stay as clean as possible during this whole process. Just a quick little soap and water scrub down of that cutting board and knife, and that's really all I need to do after this is done.